Good morning. Can all hear me okay? I just want to start by thanking the Eaton Arrowsmith community for inviting me to speak today. I was actually an attendee last year at this conference, and what I learned that day really informed my medical practice. I'm a psychiatrist. I work with young people. I'm the medical director in Vancouver and children to young adults. And it also really helped me as a parent, as a mother. And I want to thank this organization, Eaton Arrowsmith, for the impact you make, not just on neuroplasticity, on the service to young people and their families, but I think to the city of Vancouver, what you really bring to us as a leading place for education and understanding. This talk is dedicated to Dr. Jamie Zimmerman, who I think we're all experiencing or feeling the loss, but I'm very grateful for her contribution and how it's impacted my own career. So I hope she would approve of the prescriptions I'm going to give you today. So we're going to talk about some lifestyle choices and how to make these choices in an imbalanced world, in a world that sometimes we feel is stacked against us when we try to look at things like how do we eat healthy when it's hard to find healthy food? How do we take the time to do those things that we know are important? So really looking at finding balance in an imbalanced world and some simple lifestyle choices that are actually quite powerful. Now you may think that is a lot to discuss in a 50-minute talk, but I'm hoping to show you that the tools I'm going to provide are very simple. You're going to hear simple things, but don't be mistaken. Simple is not easy. So for example, drinking water is simple. We all have water. 87% of Canadians are chronically dehydrated. So simple is not easy. Sleep is simple, but we have a crisis of insomnia and sleep deprivation, including in our children. So have a drink of water. And knowing is not doing. Okay, so you may know to drink water. We all know it's important to sleep. No one's going to debate this. But that doesn't mean we're doing it. Luckily, our bodies are incredibly kind and forgiving to us. When we do it, when we drink the water, when we take that nap, when we get that good night's sleep, we become refreshed, we become rejuvenated, our irritability goes down, our energy goes up. So doing leads to being. So you will hear some simple things that you already know to do. The goal of this talk is to motivate you to act on them, to get to the being. Okay. And as a medical doctor for over 17 years right now, working with all kinds of people from all walks of life, one of my conclusions at this moment in time, and I hate to be dramatic, but I do feel that we humans are in trouble. If we look at this slide, we have never been meant, like we weren't designed as a species to sit inside at a desk staring at a screen all day. And when I look at the lifestyles of my patients, my colleagues, my family, myself, again, sometimes I feel that deck is stacked against us. And so you're going to hear me talk a lot about the human brain and what it's meant to do. And the most stable time of human development existence ever was that middle time there, that straight up man, the hunter and gatherer. And when we look at what we humans were doing during that era, the era when our brain made fantastic leaps in critical thinking and emotional regulation, we were outside, in sunlight, in nature, walking, and in social groups. Our children were playing, and I want to kind of reconnect ourselves back to understanding how lifestyle impacts our brain and our learning. So our society right now could be called several things. I tend to sometimes use the word imbalanced or toxic. This is a picture of negative evolution, and it's a paradox. Evolution should be continually progressive. But I say we've made things like sleep deprivation a symbol of ambition, and we've made being too busy a symbol of importance. We've made making mistakes a symbol of weakness, and the list goes on, and never before have we had children who've had parents so involved in their lives, but never have we had such difficulties in children's health, including things like diabetes, obesity, addiction, video gaming, anxiety, depression, all of these things I see in my practice. And of course, a lot of that is our genetics, and we can't do much about our genes, but we can do a lot about our lifestyle and our choices. So many years ago, I worked at the World Health Organization in Geneva, and the WHO does not take things lightly. And we were looking at what would be the #1 health epidemic of this century. And we were looking at things like heart disease and cancer and Ebola and HIV. And what was profound is that it was determined that stress, part of our daily lifestyle, is the #1 health epidemic of this current moment in time. How many of you feel stress on a daily basis? Of course we do. I was stressed getting here on time with my 3 kids. But we need to understand this word that we use very benignly. I've had a stressful day. You know, my boss is stressing me out. We need to understand what it does to us and why it's a health issue. So if we look at our brain, our wonderful brain, the stress, the experience of stress, it doesn't have to even be a real threat, but a perceived stress, a day that's too busy, let's say, activates our stress response. And we get a surge of things like adrenaline is a stress hormone, and it activates that lower part of our brain. We call it the primitive brain. And it moves us into this state of freeze, fight, or flight. And I'm sure you've all heard that before. But if we think of how does that manifest in our current human lives, freeze is anxiety, overwhelm, procrastination, difficulty getting out of bed. Fight, that's clear, irritability, anger, rage. And flight, escape, checking out, video gaming, alcohol, drugs, too much wine. For me, binging on Netflix for 6 hours, and it's my escape. But when you think about it that way, many of us, and myself included, are functioning in freeze, fight, or flight for days or weeks or months at a time. And that's not where we're supposed to be functioning. That is an automatic, instinctual response to perceived stress, and it makes us react versus interact from our higher levels of our brain, our cortex, where we can make conscious choices. So stress is a critical aspect. We cannot learn. The brain cannot learn when it's stressed or exhausted. And trust me, nobody's immune to stress, not even mental health professionals, not even psychiatrists. That's what happened to me when I had my 3 kids. And that could be a daily moment in my life, and it is real and it's true. And this is how we sometimes function, even though we look different on a moment like this. But it was really this experience that led me to write my book, The Dolphin Parent, because I couldn't understand how life got so overwhelming for me with my 3 kids, despite all my education and knowledge and training. And I realized that, wow, we really need to help each other, and we really need to get this message out. And it led me to write my book, The Dolphin Parent, which has been called a scientific book of common sense. My mom can't read it. She can't read. She never went to school. And she was really surprised that I was putting in studies on sleep and play. And she's like, no one's going to read this book. Everyone knows this. She goes, you're kind of wasting your time. But she didn't realize how off balance we've come as a generation, as a society, with those messages. The final cover there is the German cover, and I just want to share with you a video the Germans left. They came to interview me, and they left me with this video, and they said, we have a solution to some of your parenting issues, and I thought it was quite funny and a nice break. So I just want to share that with you. Caesar, could you play the video, please? my goodness. Those Germans are very efficient, but it was too late. Okay. All right. So what is it all about, right? When we look at this issue, stress, when we look at this crazy lifestyles, this running on the hamster wheel, when you ask people, what is this all about? People say, well, I want to be successful. I want my kids to be successful. I want to be successful in my job. But when we look at success, and we actually look at what does that mean, researchers ask people at the end of a very long life and ask them what is a successful life. And the answer that they found was enough of everything that matters. So they said it was enough of health, wealth, connection, passion, purpose, meaning, joy. More of one with a lack of something else didn't equate to a successful life. It was a life of balance. And that it really appealed to me, and I said, that certainly makes sense. That's definitely what I want for my kids, my patients. But then the question came, how do we get there? And if we were to distill down one skill that we would want to pass on to our children, the next generation, I want to tell all my patients, all those beautiful young minds I work with, what would that one skill be? And in my research, I found it, and I was surprised. It was an earth-shattering finding to find this one skill, but it was also what I say predictably obvious. And the one skill is adaptability. So wherever you go in nature or neuroscience or psychology or the business world or reality, we see adaptability becoming the difference between thriving and extinction. And we see this in nature wherever we look. Survival of the fittest doesn't mean the fastest or the strongest. What does survival of the fittest mean? The fit. The fit with our environment. The fit like a pair of shoes. I say bacteria right now are beating humans because they're adapting faster to our most powerful antibiotics. And the longest study of human development ever is a study called the Grant Study. It started in 1938 at Harvard. And they looked at individuals and followed them for 70 years. And they measured all kinds of things. They measured their IQ testing, their social skills. They measured their family backgrounds, their connectedness, their wealth, how good looking they were. They looked at everything. And after that time period, they found the top 25% who had that successful life, that balanced life with all of those things, had this trait, and it was the trait to turn lemons into lemonade, adaptability. That was the author's quotes that they found as a key determinant for a successful life. So this was all great. I was like, okay, I can do this. Lemons into lemonade, adaptability. But there's no camps for that. There's no Kumon for adaptability. How do I do this? And then I realized that the answers really are in nature. The answers are in nature. And our lifestyle that we're meant to live creates it. And this word neuroplasticity and adaptability are synonyms. Because humans, we don't adapt by getting taller or growing different wings. We adapt cognitively, we adapt intellectually, we adapt emotionally, we adapt with our ideas, and that is neuroplasticity. So have any of you heard the analogy of neuroplasticity and the trails in a forest? If anyone's heard this, put your hands up. You've heard this. Okay, so I'm going to say it again, and you'll have to hear it again. But it's a great analogy. And when we think of the trails, the tracks, the neural tracks in our brains, think of the trails in a forest. And when we go to a forest, we will see these trails, and they are developed by, how did they get there? How did these trails get there? People are walking on the trails, correct. And our brains are the same. When we walk on a trail, we form the connection. So the exercises that you're going to hear about in today's conference, what's happening at Eaton Arrowsmith, when they're practicing a certain skill set, they're walking on the trail, they're forming the connection. And the trails you don't walk on get covered up with leaves and go away. So if you don't want the trail of, I'm not good at math, I'm not a good reader, we stop walking on those trails, and we encourage children to step and put their toe on other trails. So that's neuroplasticity, that's adaptability, and there's certain things, certain lifestyle activities that greatly impact our ability to walk on new trails and create new connections. So, and that's what I want to talk about now, and how do we actually cultivate this? And what I did is I came up with, for me, going through medical school, we like to learn in visuals and metaphors. So I'm going to provide you the metaphor that I use to remember this. But just to back up a minute, it's based on kind of our own internal signals. So I'm going to mention what I call intuition. It's our own signals speaking to us that tell us what leads to neuroplasticity, what leads to adaptability. Here's an example. So when we humans do something that's good for neuroplasticity, for our adaptability, for our survival, because nature wants us to survive, our brains get a little beep, a little release of powerful neurochemicals like dopamine, and they give us a feeling of well-being, a feeling of pleasure, and we feel better. Remember, the doing leads to being. Sleep is simple, not easy. We know to do it. When we do it, we feel good, and that's our feedback loop. Too much sleep makes us feel lethargic, fuzzy in our brain. Too little sleep, irritable, fuzzy in our brain. So it's a perfect feedback loop, and if we listen to the signals of what naturally brings us a feeling of well-being, we can connect to what naturally will lead to neuroplasticity. So getting back to how I chose to remember this is, we humans remember in visuals, we remember in metaphors, and we remember in stories. And that's how I got through medical school completely. And so, of course, I created a story, a visual, a metaphor to understand what I was hoping to learn and experience and pass on. And it's the metaphor of the dolphin. And I say that we humans have forgotten what it means to be human. And sometimes we need to look outside ourselves to see ourselves. And I picked the dolphin because the dolphin is known to be highly intelligent, highly social, curious, playful, and amazing communicators. And in fact, their social areas of the brain are exquisitely developed. And they seem to always be happy and have a great life. And there's things that dolphins do every day that humans are forgetting to do. And you can remember them in the word pod, which is the word for their culture, their, how they live in groups. You can pick your own metaphor if you like. Anyone know what the P might stand for? Something dolphins and all animals in nature, in fact, the most sophisticated the animal is, the more they do it, that leads to adaptability, that leads to neuroplasticity, that we are not doing enough of. Play. Right. Okay, so your first prescription. I am a medical doctor, and I write this down. For my patients. I prescribe medication all the time, and with every prescription, I give these prescriptions as well. So our first prescription is play, and we need to think of it like a prescription. We need to elevate the importance of play right now, particularly with children. We need to see it as a dose-dependent phenomenon. If you miss a dose, it's like missing a medication. The more doses you take, the more compliant you are with this prescription, the more benefit you're going to see. So play is vital. Play is vital. And play is part of our human culture. So this is a slide in northern China. There was a recent discovery in the last year that they found an anthropological site that was considered to be pre-human, actually, right before Homo sapien. I think it was Homo naledi or something along those lines. And it was a prehistoric playground. So what they found were rocks and fossils that looked like prehistoric toys and small skeletons, which they could only understand as children. And it didn't fit the other excavation sites because there was a greater abundance of what looked like children there and these pieces that look like toys. So we are meant to play. We have evolved playing, and our children have evolved playing. And what it does is play stimulates that frontal part of our brains, the prefrontal cortex, that very human part of our brain, the area responsible for abstract thinking, for strategic planning, for emotional regulation, for social skill development, there is a whole list of very important intellectual, social, emotional, and cognitive tasks that almost exclusively occur in play. But we need to define play, because kids are forgetting what play means. And when I tell parents this, they say, does playing video games count? And it does a little bit. Let me explain. So there are two types of play. There's convergent play. So that's play that converges onto a single final point. And then there's divergent play, play that goes on in a limitless number of scenarios. The best way to understand this is the story of Lego. So how many of you played Lego growing up? Yes. So the Lego of my time, our time, I say was very similar to our childhood. And the Lego of today is very similar to today's childhood. The Lego of our time was simple. It was pretty cheap, relatively. But it was limitless in what we could create. It was never wrong. You never had a picture on the box. You could make whatever you wanted. Mistakes were a good thing. And it was highly imaginative, and the child was the leader of the play. It developed all those prefrontal skills that I just showed you. Today's play is like today's Lego, which is like today's childhood in many ways. Highly structured, full of rules. Mistakes are bad, catastrophic, in fact. There's no imagination. We know what's on. We know what we're all trying to get. The picture's on the box. It's fragile. It's rigid. It's perfectionistic. And to me, I see that as a trend in how childhood has changed. Has anyone felt this? And it's impacting our children's mental health, their intellectual, their cognitive abilities. So play, today's Lego, and my kids play with today's Lego. It's play, but it's kind of, I say, it's like the junk food of play. The superfood of play is old school Lego. Video games, think of a divergent video game, something like Minecraft, which has multiple different possibilities, versus a convergent video game would be something like, Candy Crush, where it's very clear and you're moving up. So there are numerous types of play. Play is defined as trying new and different things without evaluation. So the without evaluation is very important. Parents tell me, they're like, yes, Dr. Kang, my son plays hockey 6 days a week. He's playing. I'm like, however, he is being told how to do drills or specialized skating, and there's evaluation. I'm sure there are components to playing hockey in that 6 days, but that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about free, unstructured play without evaluation or judgment. Okay, that's that brain-boosting play. And there's different kinds. There's a variety of different kinds of play. There's play via body movement. So we all know this. Little kids love to twirl and do cartwheels and use their bodies. And in fact, we can see that bodies are a metaphor for how our minds move. So in body movement play, we see kids falling down and getting back up. That's a resiliency. They're flexible. They're learning adaptability. Because play via body movement stimulates an area of our brain called the cerebellum, the back area of the brain that helps our balance and our motor coordination. And that area of the brain is also linked to those same emotional cognitive skills of resiliency, adaptability. We see exercise. We know exercise is it's a big ingredient of neuroplasticity. We know that exercise releases brain-derived growth factors, and it stimulates all those connections we're trying to make. Well, play is a portal. Play and exercise go together via body movement. We see connection now with ADHD, and in fact, I just spoke on CBC about this study, which said children with ADHD should not be told to sit still at all. In fact, they should be told to fidget, and let them fidget, and fidget more. Because what's happening, the restlessness, the movement, helps with the focus and the attention. And this may be more true and kids move in different ways. There's some interesting studies on male and female movement. If you look at men actually in a boardroom, they're often crumpling up paper and throwing it in a wastebasket, or they're twirling their pencils, or you'll see video clips of like Obama throwing a football, and writing policy, or boys want to go play catch. Well, all of that movement, this motion, if we think back to hunter and gatherer, it activates that cognitive center. Whereas a lot of women, and this is in general, if we think about gathering behaviors, very more fine-tuned, craft behaviors, beading, craft, little girls coloring, art in that closer space also can activate. So we have to remember where we came from and what activities led our brains to develop and how we can integrate them and allow our kids to do them now. We know that there is social play, of course, and I know that you'll be hearing more about this, but social play is critical to our understanding of the world we live in. There's a famous study where they took kittens and they didn't allow them to play socially as little baby kittens. And they found when they were older, they didn't understand. They were biting too hard and scratching too hard. They didn't understand the norms of their social relationships because they were prevented to play as children. We feel that it's a time when we encode and decode social signals in play, and of all of the types of play that I think is being has a very bad name, has a stigma against it, but is vitally important, is this rough and tumble play. So rough and tumble play would be, let's say, wrestling. And before I started writing the book and doing all this research, my older two sons would wrestle, and I would have this instinct to want to step in. But in fact, rough and tumble play, jostling around, rolling around, really allows a child to develop an understanding of, it's a metaphor for our social skills, again, understanding pushing and pulling and how far to go before you hurt someone, how to have fun. I look at my sons, and in fact, they can wrestle and never hurt each other. And it's amazing. And when you look closely at children who have rough and tumble play, it's often with their closest friends, their siblings. They don't have rough and tumble play with a stranger. It's an intimate experience for children. And now, after all my research, when I see my older sons wrestling, I grab my daughter and I throw her in. And I just look away. I can't look. But they figure it out. They figure out so much and they learn so much. So we know that rough and tumble play is exceedingly important, and children who have impulsivity, children who might have difficulty understanding aggression and social, how far to push, how far to pull, can benefit from this early in life. A study was done, again, I think it was the same study with the kittens. Part of what they weren't allowed to do was little kittens roll around and have rough and tumble play when they're little. So we know there's a connection. We're learning more and more about ADHD and play and rough and tumble play specifically, and in other areas, particularly anxiety and mental health. So it activates. Of course, when you think of it, there's so much going on in the brain, not just the cerebellum or balance, but our motor cortex. There's often verbal cortex. Everything's activated, and it's an exquisite learning experience. So, sorry about that, I went backwards. Object play is playing with our hands. An amazing study, case study actually, that I featured was out of California, and it was an engineering company that found out that their older engineers were far better able to solve problems than their younger engineers, even though these younger engineers were coming from Ivy League schools and had these exquisite resumes. And when they looked back, like good engineers do, and just looked at the data, what they were able to see was that the older engineers were doing things with their hands a lot more. They were taking apart radios and putting them back together, and they were building things, whereas the younger engineers were not. And now they actually ask about playing with your hands as a child. So object play certainly helps develop important areas. There's a wonderful book called The Hand by a neurologist in California who talks about playing with object play and how it impacts our brain. So, we can go on and on. Imaginative pretend play is the superfood of play, because there's no other tool, nothing to facilitate it other than our brain, our child's brain. So imaginative play, pretend play is fantastic. And I have parents who come to me and they've actually asked, they said, you know, my child pretends and imagines and they're talking to their imaginary friends, and I'm really worried they're going to grow up and have schizophrenia. And I say absolutely not. That is a vital skill. That's a sacred activity of childhood. Encourage it. And we can encourage it. My oldest son wasn't very good at imaginary play at the beginning, and I created an imaginary dog in our house because I didn't want a real pet. I didn't want to take care of a pet at that time. And I actually did this. I bought like a little dog carrier and a couple of bones from the toy store, and it's in our porch, and his name was Bolt because the Disney movie had come out, and he was our imaginary dog. And we got involved, and then he got involved, and he was able to really develop this imaginative experience through that. So we can facilitate it. We can facilitate it. Of course, storytelling play has been part of our culture. When children, when we ask them, how was your day, or they tell the story and they go on and details, and you're like, okay. You know, we want to allow them to do that because they're making sense of their world. They're making sense of what happened to them that day. They're trying to feed it back to us. So allowing storytelling and encouraging storytelling. So all of this is we're driven towards. Our children are naturally programmed or wired to do it, and we really want to help and continue to cultivate this and bring it into our system. What's happening now, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, is kids are playing less and less. Nature, I say, is a portal for play. So nature gives us boundless opportunities for play, a stick, a tree, a blade of grass, whatever it is. And it used to be a generation ago, parents could just open the door. Now we actually have to kind of push our kids a little bit out the door and guide them and help them get there. So we know that a regimen of any kind of play improves mood, focus, attention, concentration. I've seen this over 15 years in my own practice. And we know that our kids can certainly benefit. So just to kind of wrap up and finish the lifestyle choices, I'm not going to spend too much time on the O. If you remember the pod of dolphins, remembering what it means to be human. The O is simply others. And Dr. Dan Siegel spoke brilliantly about the relationship of integration this morning. But all I want to give you is a reminder, another prescription is make sure there's connection. Okay, we want connection. Often the home has become a pit stop between all the places we have to go, and siblings are not connected to each other. Or I always say the family dinner, very simple, but not easy. The family dinner is probably the most robust findings in child development. It leads to reduced anxiety, better mental health, better physical health, less drug and alcohol problems, better academic performance for every child. Simple, but not easy. And the way we look at others, just to kind of finish the metaphor, is I say there's 3 types of interpersonal styles we can take with our children or with our colleagues or in our workplace. And a simple way to remember them is the tiger, dolphin, jellyfish. So I'm sure you've heard of Tiger Mom. Pushy, over-directing, micromanaging as well, though. Okay, so well-meaning, loving, overbearing. And that individual takes over adaptability. They're not allowing their child to walk on those trails because they're taking over, okay? And it's easier to go tie your child's shoe. It's much easier to tie their shoe than to let them or help them, guide them to do it themselves. It takes far more time to just do it for them. The jellyfish is the opposite interpersonal style, which is overly permissive, lacking rules, focus, structure, expectation. And in that sense, we see all kinds of problems with impulse control in these kids. And the balance between these 2 extremes is authoritative parenting, it's the dolphin, and it's firm but flexible. There's rules, expectations, structure, but there's freedom of autonomy, choice, independent thinking. Okay, and that's the balance. So a great way to understand your favorite teacher, the dolphin relationship might be thinking of your favorite teacher. And I know Dr. Siegel talked about teachers and the connection. But if you were to think about your favorite teacher, my guess is they probably weren't a tiger teacher. Your jellyfish teacher their classroom might have been a lot of fun, and you had a blast in there. But why weren't they your favorite teacher? Why wasn't the well-meaning, kind jellyfish teacher your favorite teacher? You didn't learn, right, yeah. So we humans, we say our feet face forward, we're meant to be challenged. We want to progress, we want to learn. And ask anyone, they'll remember that favorite coach, the favorite teacher, the individual who has that balance between not pushing too hard, but pushing a little bit, encouraging, guiding, firm but flexible. Okay, so that's the metaphor there to really end the prescriptions for today. The D is downtime. Okay, so dolphins play every day. They are exquisitely connected to their community and their families, and they rest. And in fact, we are all supposed to balance activity and rest. This is the other thing that's missing in our lifestyle, and especially young kids' lifestyle. Downtime has gotten a bad name. If you say that you're resting, people think you're lazy or not ambitious or not competitive. And so we need to really take a moment and understand what's happening there. And I want to talk about downtime, define it as relaxed wakefulness. There's a lot of conversations about meditation. Meditation's fabulous. If you can't get to meditation yet, you're on your way, like someone like me, and it's taken about 10 years. I'm still trying. Relaxed wakefulness is highly beneficial, okay? So this would be a time when you're just slowing down, a few breaths, staring at a tree, just taking a moment. And what it does, it enhances all kinds of very important cognitive processes. In fact, 10 years ago, the world kind of woke up and found out how important sleep is. Sleep does all of these amazing things. We're at the point where we're understanding downtime and all of the amazing things it's doing. And there's a lot going on there. Of course, we know meditation has profound effects on neuroplasticity, and it's like the super activity for neuroplasticity and adaptability. But we also want to just look at simple things, simple but not easy, a deep breath, closing your eyes, looking at nature, and what we see when we do this is there's an area in our brain, it's called the default mode network. It's when connections start to occur from diverse areas of our brain, and we experience, I say, adaptability occurs during downtime, okay? So play is how we adapt. We learn to adapt. Others is often why we adapt if we don't want to walk on that trail. Somebody else, that dolphin relationship will encourage us to walk on that trail. And downtime is when we adapt. So when the actual connections are being made. So downtime is highly important. We need to get rid of that stigma. And I write this prescription. Do nothing at all. Okay, sometimes just do nothing. And I had a story, a young girl was referred to me for attention deficit, anxiety, all kinds of stuff. And I said, why? And they said that the parent felt, or the teacher felt, that she was really distracted and she was always looking outside staring at the trees. But then when I took her history, she basically woke up and was like running all day in the sense of that her schedule was packed. And she actually didn't even have a few minutes to look outside or stare at the tree. And like, she doesn't have this at all. She just needs some downtime. She does not have a serious mental health issue. She has a serious lifestyle issue. This needs to be addressed from a lifestyle point of view. So let's remember that when our children look like that, there's a lot going on, and I say that's a sacred activity. We don't want to impact that. This is how our brains function. Of course, we need some challenge. We want some stress, if you remember the first slide, but too much, we unravel. Okay, so when people say, this all sounds great, Dr. Kang, but I'm too busy, to play as an adult. I'm too busy to play, or I'm too busy to have downtime. Then I say, well, then you're too busy to be healthy, and you're also too busy to be brilliant or perform at your optimal level. So getting back to stress and what it does and puts us into freeze, fight, or flight, I'm hoping you got a few prescriptions that can take you from that place to thinking with our higher cortex, engaging that level of our brain where we can make conscious choices. And instead of reacting in freeze, fight, or flight, we can now interact. We can interact through conscious choices and decisions versus automatic reaction. My last prescriptions for all of you, I say, is a daily dose of the play others downtime. Use these for yourselves, give them to your colleagues, your friends. Be a dolphin, be that collaborative. Don't be a jellyfish, don't be that tiger. If you can, these aren't labels, they're in us, all of us. I usually say on Monday I'm a tiger because I'm all stressed, I have all this stuff to do. By Friday I'm a jellyfish because I'm exhausted. And on Wednesday I'm a pretty good dolphin. So I want to thank you all for your time and attention. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to you. I am available online through all kinds of stuff. I have free videos and resources if you're interested, and I'd be happy to take your questions during the panel. Thank you.